When I first heard that choking sound, that desperate cry rising up from beneath the snow, my heart froze in my chest because I knew it wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't just the wind whistling through the trees or the cracking of ice. This was something alive, something in pain. I was walking through the forest that morning, bundled in my old coat, boots crunching on the hard crust of snow. The sky was low, heavy with clouds, and the cold cut through me like glass. Out there, in the middle of winter, you learn to listen to every sound. The forest speaks differently when the temperature drops below zero. Trees pop and crack, foxes leave their tracks across frozen streams, ravens call from the treetops. But this sound, it didn't belong to any of that. It was raw, like breath forced through broken lungs, followed by a guttural whine that seemed to vibrate in my bones. I stopped. My breath came out in clouds, and for a moment I didn't move, afraid the silence might shatter. Then I heard it again, closer this time. A strangled cry, followed by the unmistakable scrape of metal. That was when my stomach turned. Metal. Out here, in the deep woods, that could only mean one thing: a trap. I pushed forward, snow biting into my shins with every step, branches snapping against my shoulders. My gloves were stiff with frost, but I used my bare hands to pull aside the brush, and there he was, a wolf. He was caught in a steel trap, his front leg clamped in iron teeth. The snow around him was stained dark, the ice broken and spattered from his struggle. His fur was matted with blood where the jaws of the trap had bitten deep. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The stories I'd grown up with rushed through my head. Wolves tearing livestock, hunters boasting of kills, old men warning of eyes that glowed in the dark. My first instinct was to back away, to leave him there before he noticed me, but he had already noticed. His head jerked up, ears flat against his skull, and his eyes locked onto mine. I had expected rage. I had expected that wild, unrelenting hatred of man that I had always been told wolves carried in their hearts. But what I saw was not anger. It was something else entirely. It was despair. That look, it burned through me like fire. There was no hate in it, no hunger, just a raw, naked plea, a silent question. Will you help me, or will you walk away? My hands shook. My breath came hard, clouding the air between us. I wanted to turn and run. My mind screamed it at me. This is a wolf, an apex predator, the last thing you should ever come close to. But my body wouldn't move. Something in that gaze rooted me to the ground. He growled, low and broken, his whole body trembling from exhaustion. The trap had chewed into his flesh, and every small movement made his blood steam against the snow. I realized then, he wasn't just fighting me, he was fighting death itself. I took a step closer. My boots crunched, and his ears flicked. He didn't lunge, he didn't snarl. He only watched, muscles tense, as if waiting to see what kind of man I truly was. My father had once told me, long ago, that the forest has a memory, that every act in it echoes longer than we can imagine. I had laughed at the time, but standing there, staring into the eyes of a dying wolf, I felt that memory weighing down on me. I knelt, my knees sank into the snow, the cold biting through my trousers, and I reached for the trap. The steel was frozen stiff, the springs hard with ice. My fingers ached as I tried to pry it open. The wolf's breath came in heavy bursts, white steam mixing with mine. He didn't move. He could have tried to bite, to snap his jaws, to tear at me in one last desperate attempt to survive. But he didn't. He simply stood there, trembling, trusting, or maybe too weak to fight. And then his eyes met mine again. God help me, I almost cried. Because in that stare, there was no predator, no beast. There was only a creature in pain, begging me to do what he could not. I pressed harder, straining against the iron. My arms shook, muscles burning until with a sharp metallic crack, the jaws sprang open. The wolf staggered back, his paw torn and bleeding, the snow soaking crimson beneath him. For a heartbeat I thought he would leap, that instinct would return, and I'd feel teeth in my flesh. But he didn't. He stood there, just stood. His chest heaved, steam rising in great clouds, his leg trembling as he tried to put weight on it. And then, slowly, almost reverently, he lowered his head. I froze. It wasn't submission, it wasn't threat. It was something I cannot explain even now, a moment of recognition, as if he understood. Then, without a sound, he turned. Limping, dragging his wounded leg, he moved into the trees. The branches swallowed him, his gray coat vanishing into the white storm. I stayed on my knees, the trap at my feet, my hands raw and bleeding from the frozen steel. My breath came ragged, my chest tight as if I had run for miles. I thought that was the end of it. Just a strange, terrifying, beautiful moment in the forest, a story I'd carry to the grave. But I was wrong, dead wrong. I thought it was over, just an accident of fate, just a wolf in a trap. I didn't know then, it was only the beginning. When the trap snapped open beneath my hands, I thought for sure it would be the last sound I ever heard. The jaws of steel released with a jolt, and in that instant, the wolf was free. For a single frozen heartbeat, we just stared at each other. Me on my knees in the snow, my chest heaving, and him standing there, his paw dripping blood into the white powder, his breath rising in hard bursts. The forest had gone dead quiet, as if every living thing around us was holding its breath too. Then he moved. I flinched so hard I nearly toppled backward. Every instinct in me screamed run. My hands clawed at the snow, searching for balance, for a weapon, for anything. His body shifted, his weight pressing forward, and I saw the glint of his teeth. My throat went dry. This was it. I had freed a wolf and handed myself over to him at the same time. But he didn't leap. He didn't snarl. Instead, he stepped back. One slow, limping stride, his wounded leg trembling, then another. His eyes never left mine, unblinking, burning with something I couldn't name. I felt my stomach twist, because I realized I was more terrified of that gaze than of any attack. It wasn't the look of a predator sizing up prey. It was a look of recognition. I stayed frozen in place. The distance between us was no more than a few steps, nothing that would have saved me if he changed his mind. I could hear my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. My hands shook so badly, I pressed them into the snow just to steady myself. And still he watched me. I don't know how long we stood like that. Seconds, maybe. It felt like forever. Every breath I took filled my lungs with ice, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. He was hurt, weak, bloodied, but there was power in him all the same. A quiet, terrible power. Then, almost imperceptibly, something shifted in the air between us. His shoulders dropped just a little. His tail twitched once. The fury I had braced myself for never came. What I saw instead was something I will never forget as long as I live. Understanding. That wolf knew I had freed him. He knew it. And in that moment, the fear inside me cracked. For the first time, I felt something else creeping in. Wonder. He turned then, slow and deliberate, as though careful not to startle me. His paw dragged in the snow, leaving a streak of red behind, but he did not stumble. His body swayed with exhaustion, yet he held himself with the dignity of a king retreating from battle. Step by step, he moved toward the tree line. The branches seemed to reach for him, shadows swallowing him whole. But just before he disappeared, he stopped, and he looked back. That glance, God, that glance. It cut me to the core. His eyes found mine again, steady, deliberate, as if sealing something between us. Not threat, not hatred, something far stranger, far heavier. A silent mark I will not forget. Then he was gone. The forest exhaled around me. Birds shifted in the distance. The wind shook the branches. and sound returned to the world. But I stayed there, kneeling in the snow, too stunned to move. My hands were raw from the frozen steel, my knees numb, but I couldn't feel any of it. All I could feel was the weight of that final glance pressing into me like a brand. Slowly, I staggered to my feet. My legs shook beneath me, and I leaned on a tree just to catch my breath. The empty trap lay twisted in the snow at my feet, its jaws black with blood. I stared at it, then at the streak of paw prints leading off into the woods. My chest tightened with something I couldn't explain. Relief, awe, fear, all of it tangled into one unbearable knot. I laughed once, sharp and hollow, the sound bouncing off the trees. What had I done? What madness had seized me to kneel beside a trapped wolf and put my hands on steel teeth sharp enough to sever bone? I had no answer. But I knew this. I had looked into the eyes of a wild predator and seen something that shook the foundations of what I thought I knew about the world. I let out a long, ragged breath. My shoulders sagged, my body trembling from the release of fear. I thought it was over. I thought the forest had shown me its miracle, and that I could walk away with a story no one would ever believe. I thought the wolf would vanish into the wilderness, and I'd never see him again. I thought the chapter had closed, but I was wrong. I exhaled, convinced the miracle had already happened. I had no idea. It was only the beginning. The days that followed blurred into a kind of silence. The cold deepened, the sky darkened, and the snow piled higher against the walls of my cabin. Winter had locked its jaws around the land, and every morning I woke to a world that felt sharper, harder, as if even the air itself might break. I tried to push the wolf from my mind. I told myself it was finished, that I had done a foolish thing, a reckless thing, and walked away unharmed. A miracle, yes, but one that belonged to the forest, not to me. But the forest has a way of reminding you. It was the third night after I'd freed him. The wind had died, and the cold pressed in so heavy it felt like the walls of the cabin were made of glass. I had been stacking firewood earlier that day, my hands stiff and raw, and I noticed something then. At first I thought it was nothing, just the usual clutter of tracks around the clearing. Rabbits, foxes, maybe a stray deer. But when I knelt closer, my breath caught. They were wolf tracks, fresh, circling the cabin. I froze in the snow, the wood still in my arms. My heart began to pound. I traced the prints with my eyes, broad pads, deep in the powder, a limp in the stride where the paw had dragged. My blood ran cold. It was him, the wolf I had freed. He had been here, circling my home, watching. The thought made my chest tighten like a vice. I dropped the woodpile and stumbled back inside, bolting the door, though I knew it wouldn't matter much if he wanted in. For hours I sat there staring into the flames, every crack of the logs making me jump. Why was he here? Was he hunting me? Was the gratitude I thought I'd seen nothing but an illusion, a trick of fear and exhaustion? Had I just fed him with my mercy, and now he wanted more? I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, the tracks were half filled with new snow, but I saw them again, more of them, circling wider. He had come back. My stomach twisted. Each time I stepped outside, I felt the weight of unseen eyes on me, watching from the tree line. 3 more days passed. The cold grew sharper still, the kind that claws through your clothes and eats at your bones. I carried water, chopped wood, tended the fire, and always, I looked for tracks, and always I found them. I told myself it was coincidence. Wolves roam, they travel. Maybe he had simply passed by, but in my gut I knew better. The prints weren't random. They circled, they lingered, they waited. Then one night, the silence broke. It was near midnight. I had been dozing in my chair by the fire when a sound tore me awake. At first, I thought it was the wind, a long, low moan that rattled the glass in the windows. But as I sat up, my heart hammering, I knew. It was a howl, a wolf's cry. It rolled across the frozen land, rising and falling like a voice calling to something far beyond me. It wasn't close, not at the door, not in the clearing, but it was near enough that the sound shook me to my core. I sat frozen, my breath shallow, staring into the dark corners of the cabin. The cry rose again, longer this time, carrying through the forest like a prayer. It was no ordinary call. It was not hunger, not rage. It was something else, a signal, a mark. And though I had no right to understand, something deep in me responded. I felt it in my chest, like a cord pulling taut. My skin prickled, and tears burned at the corners of my eyes before I even knew why. It felt less like a warning and more like a summons, as if the wolf was not threatening me, but reaching for me. I pressed my hands to my ears, but the sound lived inside me now, echoing through bone and blood. My whole body trembled as the cry faded into the frozen silence, leaving me raw, shaken, and horribly, impossibly aware. He had not forgotten me. I stumbled to the window, pulling aside the frost-crusted curtain. Moonlight glared across the snow, the forest stretching dark and endless, and there, at the very edge of the clearing, I thought I saw it, a shadow moving, low and deliberate. My breath fogged the glass, but when I blinked, it was gone. I sank back into the chair, my chest heaving, my fire cracked, sparks leaping, but all I could hear was that cry reverberating in my skull. I told myself it was nothing, just the forest, just a wolf warning his kin, a song of survival in the dead of winter. Nothing more. I almost convinced myself, almost. I thought the howl was meant to frighten me, nothing else. I thought the story was over, that the wolf had repaid his debt with fear, and we would go our separate ways. But I was wrong. I was so terribly wrong. I opened the door, pulling my coat tight against the bitter cold, and there it was, lying right at the foot of my steps. A hare, freshly killed, its fur stiff with frost, its body neatly placed as if someone had set it there on purpose. I stood there in the doorway, blinking in the pale winter light, the cold biting at my face. For a moment, I thought I had lost my mind. My first thought was that some fox had dropped it, spooked by the smell of smoke or the creak of the cabin door. Maybe it had been stolen and left behind in panic. That had to be it. But even as I bent down and lifted the animal by its hind legs, something about it unsettled me. It hadn't been torn apart, not mauled like the scraps a scavenger leaves behind. It was whole, clean, almost deliberate. I brought it inside, laid it on the table, and stared. My stomach knotted as the only other possibility crept into my mind. The wolf. I shook my head violently, as if I could fling the thought away like snow from my cap. Number. That was absurd. Wolves don't bring offerings. Wolves kill, eat, survive. They don't leave gifts on doorsteps like some neighbor passing by with a basket of food. I tried to forget about it. I skinned the hare, cooked what I could, and told myself it was chance, a fluke of the wilderness, nothing more. But the next morning, when I stepped outside again, I froze where I stood, because there, in the exact same place, was another one, another hare, limp in the snow, its body unbroken, laid out as if someone had placed it carefully. My hands began to tremble. The world around me seemed to narrow, the trees crowding closer, the silence pressing heavier on my ears. My breath came fast, steaming in the air. This was no accident. I lifted the animal slowly, my heart hammering. Its fur was still warm beneath the frost. I looked out toward the tree line, eyes scanning the endless white. I saw nothing, just shadows, just silence. But I knew. The wolf had done this. I sank down onto the steps, the hare still in my hands, and for the first time since I freed him, tears burned at my eyes. They came hot against the cold, stinging as they rolled down my cheeks. Because in that moment, the truth of it struck me so hard I couldn't breathe. He wasn't threatening me. He wasn't circling to hunt. He was feeding me. I sat there shaking, clutching the animal as though it were proof of something I had no right to witness. I felt the weight of it, the life taken, not for his own hunger, but somehow, impossibly, for mine. The forest swirled around me in silence, as if holding its breath at the impossible truth. How do you explain something like that? How do you tell yourself it's real when everything you've ever known screams it cannot be? Wolves are predators. They take, they kill, they do not give, and yet there it was, lying heavy in my hands. I carried it inside, my vision blurred, and I couldn't bring myself to eat right away. I just sat there, staring at the carcass on the table, the firelight flickering over its frozen fur, my chest tightening with every breath. Gratitude, wonder, fear, all of it churned together until I felt I might burst. That night I dreamed of him, the wolf standing at the edge of the clearing, eyes locked on mine, the same eyes I had seen when I freed him from the trap. But in the dream, there was no blood, no wound. He stood strong, whole, watching, and I woke with tears on my pillow. By the third day, I was almost afraid to open the door. My hands shook as I lifted the latch, my breath shallow, and when I stepped out, I found nothing, just snow, just silence. Relief washed over me, followed by disappointment so sharp it hurt. I almost laughed at myself then. How had I come to this? Waiting like a child for a wild beast to leave me gifts at my door. I told myself it was finished. 2 hares, nothing more. Some mystery of the forest that I would never understand. I told myself it was over. But the forest is patient, and the wolf was not finished. I decided that morning it must be the last time. A strange blessing, yes, but surely not to be repeated. I tried to push it from my mind. I tried to tell myself the story had ended. But nature had prepared something far greater, something I could never have imagined, and I was not ready for it. For days I couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen was moving around me, just beyond the reach of my eyes. I had stopped pretending the gifts at my door were chance. No part of me believed that anymore, but the mystery of why still gnawed at me. Why me? Why spare me, feed me, when he owed me nothing? One morning, after a night of restless dreams, I decided I had to know. The sky was brittle blue, the kind of cold that bites your lungs with every breath. I stepped out of the cabin, scanning the clearing, and there it was again, a trail in the snow, broad prints leading away from my door, the paw dragging slightly, always slightly, where the wound had been. I pulled my scarf up over my mouth and began to follow. The tracks wound through the trees, over a ridge, and down into a shallow valley where the snow lay deeper, untouched. My boots crunched loudly in the silence, every step a drumbeat against the stillness. I kept my eyes on the trail, watching as the marks spread wider, then narrower again, weaving like a map only he could read. And then, halfway down the slope, I stopped dead, because beside the deep paw prints of the wolf were smaller ones. At first I thought they belonged to a fox. The spacing was tight, the prints light. But when I crouched and brushed the snow with my glove, my breath caught. They weren't fox prints, they were wolf prints. Tiny ones, pups. I rose slowly, my chest tight, scanning the valley below as if they might appear before me. My hands trembled in my gloves. The idea spun in my mind, dizzying. He wasn't alone. The wolf I had freed, the wolf who had circled my cabin, who had left gifts at my door. He had a family, a mate, a den. I followed farther, my steps cautious, reverent, until the trees thinned and the tracks led into a cluster of boulders piled with snow. I didn't dare go closer, something in me knew I was already trespassing on sacred ground. I crouched there in the shadows of the pines, heart pounding, staring at those tracks that vanished into the stones. The truth crashed over me so hard I swayed where I stood. He wasn't just a wolf, he was a leader, a father, a protector of more than just himself. And yet, he had shared his kills with me. The realization hit like a blade to the gut. In his mind, I wasn't just some man in a cabin. I wasn't prey. I wasn't even an intruder anymore. I was part of the circle, a member of the pack. I pressed a hand to my mouth as tears blurred my eyes. My throat tightened so painfully I could hardly breathe. The image came unbidden. The wolf standing at the tree line that night, staring into me with eyes that burned, and now I understood. That look, it hadn't just been gratitude, it had been recognition. God help me, I whispered aloud to the trees, my voice breaking. He sees me as his own. The words sounded insane, but they were true. I knew it deep in my bones. He had claimed me, in whatever strange way wolves claim each other, as part of his world. I sank onto a fallen log, staring at the snow, my breath shaking in and out. My life had been small until then, chopping wood, tending the stove, surviving winter like everyone else. But in that moment, my world cracked open. I was staring into a truth I had never believed possible. That nature itself could cross the divide, that a wild creature could pull me into its circle with nothing but a look, a gift, a trail of paw prints. I sat there for what felt like hours, numb with wonder, until the cold began to gnaw at my skin. Finally, I rose and turned back toward the cabin. But I walked differently now, as if every tree, every shadow, every flake of snow had shifted, as if the forest itself had leaned closer, whispering secrets I could never share. When I stepped back into my yard, I looked at the cabin with new eyes. It no longer felt like just mine. It felt shared, as though I lived on borrowed ground, under borrowed trust. That night, I lay awake by the fire, the shadows dancing across the walls, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw those smaller prints beside his. I saw him bringing me food, even while feeding mouths at his den, and my chest ached with a mix of gratitude and fear so sharp I thought it would split me in two. I thought then that I had reached the peak of it, that nothing could go further than this impossible bond. I thought it was the limit. The forest had revealed its wonder, and I had glimpsed more than any man deserved. But I was wrong. I was so terribly wrong. I thought it ended here. I didn't know the hardest trial was still ahead. The storm came without warning. One moment, the forest was silent, brittle in the cold, and the next, the wind roared down from the hills like a living thing. Snow whipped sideways, stinging my face, blinding my eyes. The world vanished in a wall of white, and I was caught in it, swallowed whole. I had gone farther than I should have that morning. I don't even remember why. Habit, maybe, or some foolish urge to trace the wolf's path again. But when the sky darkened and the first flurries turned to a frenzy, I realized too late how far I'd wandered from the cabin. I tried retracing my steps, but the snow fell so fast it filled my tracks before I had taken 10 more paces. The wind screamed through the pines, bending them, snapping branches that crashed down all around me. My chest heaved, each breath burning like ice. Panic clawed at me. I was lost. The forest I thought I knew had turned alien in seconds. Every tree looked the same. The snow erased everything. The horizon, the sky, even the ground beneath my boots. It was just white, endless, swallowing sound and sense alike. I stumbled forward, teeth clenched, the cold creeping into my bones. My vision blurred with tears the wind ripped from my eyes. I thought of the cabin stove, the crackle of firewood, the safe little circle of warmth I might never see again. Fear rose inside me, raw and suffocating. I yelled into the storm, a hoarse, broken cry, but the wind stole my voice and hurled it into nothing. That was when I saw him. At first, he was only a shadow in the blizzard, a shape moving against the swirling snow. My heart lurched. I staggered back, nearly falling, certain it was death itself come to finish me. The wolf. He stood a few paces ahead, his coat rimed with frost, his breath streaming like smoke. His eyes glowed faint in the storm, fixed on me, my chest locked tight with terror. Trapped in the storm, half frozen, and now him, my mind screamed the end had come. But he didn't move toward me. He turned. Slowly, with the same deliberate calm he had shown the night I freed him, he began to walk, his body cut through the storm, steady, unhurried. Then he stopped, glanced back once, and waited. My breath caught. I didn't want to believe it. My legs trembled, my fear twisting every thought. But something deeper than thought pulled at me. His gaze wasn't threat, it was command. Follow. I stumbled after him. The snow whipped at my face, blinding me, but I fixed on his shadow ahead. He moved with certainty, weaving between trees I could barely see. Each time I faltered, he slowed, waiting just long enough before carrying on. Step after step, I followed him like a pilgrim chasing a vision. My lungs burned, my legs shook, and the storm screamed in my ears, but that shadow pulled me forward. The wolf, my wolf, was leading me. Time stretched and warped. I don't know how long we moved like that. Minutes, hours. My world shrank to the space between us. The storm, the snow, his paw prints vanishing almost as soon as they appeared, and me, desperate, clinging to that thread of guidance. Then, through the curtain of white, something emerged. A darker shape, solid, immovable. My heart leapt. The cabin. I stumbled forward, tears spilling hot down my frozen cheeks, the walls, the roof heavy with snow, the faint outline of my woodpile. It was real, salvation rising out of the blizzard. My knees nearly gave out. The wolf stopped just short of the clearing. He stood there, his body a gray phantom against the storm, his eyes on me. My chest clenched as our gazes locked one last time, and then, as silently as he had appeared, he turned and melted back into the white. I staggered up the steps, fumbling with frozen fingers at the door, and collapsed inside. The warmth hit me like fire, and I broke apart, sobs tearing from my chest, my body shaking with exhaustion and relief. I pressed my back to the door, the storm howling outside, and let the tears come. I was alive, alive because of him. The very beast I had feared, the predator I had grown up taught to dread, had been my savior. He had led me home when the forest itself had tried to bury me. When I finally steadied, I whispered into the silence of the cabin, my voice raw. He saved me. The fire popped, sparks leaping, but no other sound answered, just the storm raging beyond the walls. I thought then that the story had ended, that fate had drawn its line, balanced the scales. I had freed him, and he had returned the gift, leading me out of death's grip. I thought the circle was complete, but I was wrong. When I stepped back into that storm and found my way to safety, I believed it was over. But destiny had written something else entirely. When I came back to my cabin alive, I thought everything was finished. I didn't know. It was only the beginning of the truest trial. I thought the storm had closed the circle. I thought I'd seen the last of him when he vanished into that white fury and left me standing at my door, alive only because he had chosen to guide me. For days after, I carried that truth like a secret weight, both terrifying and holy. I tried to settle back into the rhythms of survival, splitting wood, hauling water, mending tools, but no matter what I did, my thoughts circled back to him. And then, one morning, he returned. The sky was clear that day, blue so sharp it hurt the eyes. The snow glittered in the sun, crusted hard enough to hold my weight. I had gone to the edge of the clearing to check the traps I'd set for rabbits. though I hardly needed them now. Some part of me just wanted to move, to do something ordinary, to quiet the storm inside me. That was when I felt it, the prickle on the back of my neck, the sense of being watched. I froze, the cold air cutting through me, and turned slowly. He was there, not at the tree line, not in the distance, but close. So close I could see the scars on his muzzle, the frost clinging to his fur, the steady rise and fall of his chest. He stood no more than 10 paces away, silent as the snow itself, his paws planted firm, his eyes locked on me. My breath seized in my throat. I couldn't move. The memory of the storm, of following his shadow through the white, surged up in me, mingling with the older memory of him in the trap. The fear was still there. God, it was always there. But beneath it ran something else, something deeper. He stepped forward, 1 pace, then another. The world narrowed to the crunch of his paws in the snow, the sound impossibly loud in the silence. My pulse hammered in my ears, my body screaming at me to flee, but my legs were rooted to the ground. I couldn't run. I didn't even want to. Closer he came, until I could see the flecks of amber in his eyes, the way the winter light caught in them and made them burn. He stopped just short of me, close enough that I could feel the heat of his breath misting in the air between us. And then, it happened. Our eyes met, and the storm inside me stilled. The fear, the doubt, the pounding rush of blood, all of it fell away. In its place came a quiet so deep it felt like standing at the bottom of a frozen lake. He was looking at me, not as a predator looks at prey, not as a beast looks at a threat. He was looking at me as if he knew me, as if he remembered. I felt it physically, like a weight pressing against my chest, a sensation so powerful it brought tears unbidden to my eyes. The thought rose unshakable, undeniable. He is thanking me. My hands trembled at my sides. My lips parted, though no words came. I wanted to speak, to tell him I understood, that I saw him too. But my voice was gone, stolen by the enormity of the moment. For a long time we stood like that, 2 creatures from different worlds, bound by something neither of us could name. My breath came shallow, my vision blurred, but I couldn't look away. His gaze held me fast, steady and calm, as if he were pouring something into me without sound, without movement, recognition, gratitude, trust. And then, as quietly as he had come, he stepped back, 1 pace, then another. His eyes lingered on mine for a heartbeat longer, and then he turned, slipping into the trees. I stood rooted to the spot, tears freezing on my cheeks, my chest aching as though my heart had been gripped by unseen hands. I had never felt so small, so unworthy, and yet so blessed. When my legs finally remembered how to move, I stumbled back toward the cabin. My steps felt unsteady, dreamlike, as though I were walking in a world that no longer belonged fully to me. Inside, I collapsed by the fire, burying my face in my hands. My body shook, not from the cold, but from something far greater. I wanted to believe that was the end, that he had come to me one final time, not as predator or savior, but as something closer to kin, that we had spoken in silence and said all there was to say. I wanted to believe the story had closed, but I was wrong. I wanted to tell myself that moment was the last, but the truth is, it was only the beginning. The story was not ending. It was just beginning. The first sign came as boot prints. I spotted them on the ridge one morning, heavy imprints in the snow that didn't belong. Too wide for deer, too deliberate for any animal. They were men's tracks, cutting straight across the forest where no man had reason to be. My stomach dropped the instant I saw them. Poachers. The valley had always drawn them, though rarely in winter. But wolves fetch a price, even their pelts alone, and hunger makes men crueler than any beast. As I stood there staring down at those prints, the hair on the back of my neck rose. A cold, that had nothing to do with the wind settled into me. I followed, cautious, until I found what I feared most: traps, steel jaws, hidden under loose powder, cruel and waiting. They lay like landmines across the paths the wolves favored, their springs dusted with snow, their teeth gleaming faint beneath. I crouched and touched one, my gloves stiff with frost, and bile rose in my throat. I remembered the sound of the first trap snapping open, remembered the wolf's torn flesh, his eyes burning into mine. Rage and fear twisted together inside me until my hands shook. He was out here, him and his mate and his pups, and now death waited in the snow for them. I couldn't breathe. My chest squeezed tight as though a fist had clamped around my ribs. I wanted to smash the traps, hurl them into the river, but there were too many, and even if I destroyed one line, they would come back with more. That night, I barely slept, my ears straining for every sound beyond the cabin walls. The wind groaned through the trees, snow shifting on the roof, and beneath it all, in my mind, the metallic snap of steel teeth. When morning came, I went back. I had to. I followed the trails, searching desperately, my eyes darting to every shadow, every drift that might hide iron jaws. I half expected to find him caught again, torn and bleeding, his eyes dimming in the snow, but I didn't. Instead, I found his tracks, the broad paw prints cut across the path, circling wide around the traps. He had passed by them, seen them, smelled them, known them, and led his family safely away. The smaller prints trailed close behind, weaving through his, never once straying into danger. Relief hit me so hard my knees buckled. I dropped to the snow, clutching a branch for balance, tears stinging hot against the cold. My chest heaved as laughter broke from me, ragged and breathless, the kind that comes only when terror lifts its grip at the very last moment. He was alive, not just alive, he was wise. Smarter than the men who thought to trick him, stronger than their cruelty. He had read the forest better than they ever could. I followed his trail a while longer, my boots crunching in the snow. Each turn he had taken was deliberate, each detour calculated, leading the smaller paws safely past death. And with every step, pride swelled in me, pride that had no business belonging to a man. But it was there all the same. I felt it like a fire in my chest, a fierce, protective pride that wasn't even mine to hold. It belonged to him, to his pack, to the wild itself, and yet somehow, impossibly, I carried it with me as if it were my own. "He's too clever for you," I whispered into the empty air, speaking to the faceless hunters who had laid their snares. My voice trembled with a mix of defiance and awe. "You'll never take him. Not him. If your heart is trembling right now, you understand. Subscribe. Here, the true miracles of nature are told." The forest gave no answer, but in my bones I knew it was true. As the sun dipped and the light bled away, I turned back toward my cabin, the trail fading behind me. My heart still pounded, but it was no longer fear alone that drove it. It was wonder, gratitude, even something like love. That night, sitting by the fire, I stared into the flames until my eyes blurred. The image of those paw prints circling wide around the traps seared into me, proof of a cunning that no man could deny. He wasn't just surviving, he was protecting, outsmarting, leading, and for the first time, I felt certain he would endure. That nothing men built, no cruelty they laid in the snow, could outmatch him. I let out a long, unsteady breath, my shoulders sinking with relief. I thought the danger had passed. I thought he had won his battle, and I could finally rest, knowing he was beyond their reach. I thought the story was over, but I was wrong. I thought he needed nothing more from me, that he could outwit the world on his own, but fate had prepared something else, something I could never have foreseen, and the ending was still waiting. It happened on a night so still it felt as if the world itself was waiting. The storm had passed, the sky clear and sharp, and the snow lay heavy under the weight of the moon. I had been sitting by the fire, half asleep, when something tugged at me, an unease I couldn't explain. The kind of feeling that pulls you upright before you even know why. I rose, pulled on my coat, and stepped outside. At first, I thought I was dreaming. The clearing lay silent, bathed in silver light, and there, at the edge of the trees, they stood. Not one, not two, an entire pack, shapes in the moonlight, tall and still, their breath rising in clouds. A dozen wolves, maybe more, their eyes glinting like coals, their bodies poised in silence. My blood went cold, and yet I couldn't move. Fear pressed at me, yes, but alongside it came something far stronger, a reverence so heavy it drove me to stillness, and at the front, just a few steps ahead of the others, was him, the wolf I had freed. He stood tall, scarred and proud, his chest heaving in slow, steady breaths. The moonlight caught his coat, silver and shadow mingling in a way that made him look almost otherworldly. His gaze was fixed on me, unwavering, unblinking. I gripped the doorframe for balance, my legs trembling. The fire behind me crackled faint through the open doorway, but out here the silence was absolute. Not a growl, not a sound of threat. Only the quiet, heavy presence of wolves watching a man. For a moment, time fractured. I wasn't a man in a cabin anymore. I wasn't a hunter, a woodsman, a trespasser in their world. I was something else, something I had no name for. He stepped forward, just one pace, his paw pressed into the snow with deliberate calm. The rest of the pack stayed still, their eyes never leaving me. And then it happened again, that look, the same look I had seen in the trap, the same look in the storm, but this time it was bigger, heavier, final. His eyes bore into mine with a weight that stripped me bare, and I felt it, not fear, not threat, recognition, acceptance. My chest seized as though my ribs could no longer contain my heart. The truth rose in me so clear, so undeniable, it left me shaking. He hadn't just spared me. He hadn't just guided me or fed me. He had claimed me. For a time, however brief, he had welcomed me into something no man belonged to, his circle, his family, his pack. My vision blurred with tears that froze on my lashes. I pressed a hand to my chest, breath ragged, unable to withstand the force of it. I wanted to speak, to cry out, to tell him I understood, but my voice was gone. All I could do was stand there, bound to him in silence. The pack waited. Perfect stillness, like shadows carved from snow and moonlight. And then, after a breath that seemed to last an eternity, he turned. He did not run. He did not slink. He walked. With slow, certain steps, he moved back into the forest. The others followed, one by one, their bodies vanishing into the trees until only the night remained. And just before the darkness swallowed him, he stopped once more. He looked back. For the last time, his eyes met mine, steady and calm, and in that gaze I felt it, the closing of something vast and unexplainable, a farewell, yes, but more than that, a promise. Then he was gone. The clearing was empty. The silence returned. My breath came fast, my chest tight, my hands shaking so violently I could hardly close the door behind me. Inside, I collapsed by the fire, burying my face in my hands as sobs tore through me. Not of fear, not of relief, but of something greater, something that split me wide open and left me raw. Because I knew then that I had seen something no man should see, something impossible and yet undeniable. The wolf had shown me what could not be spoken, that the wild is not mindless, not merciless, not separate. It remembers, it forgives, it binds, and in his gaze, in that final glance, I had seen the truth that will haunt me until my last breath. The beast had shown me something that changed my life forever. He had shown me that we are not as different as we think, that nature, in all its cruelty and beauty, has a place for mercy too. And though my mind still rebels, my heart knows it with unshakable certainty. Such things don't happen. But I saw it. I swear to God, I saw it with my own eyes. And I still cannot believe. Not even now. And if you're